Welcome to episode 2 of Off the Bandstand. My name is Christian Wiggs. I am your host. Today's guest is Paul Deemer, a really great jazz trombone player here in Austin. If you've been in the city, you've probably heard him all around the jazz scene. It's so great to take an hour and a half and kind of pick his brain about a few different things, hear his influences, hear where he came from, and all the things he's been up to. He, over the course of the coronavirus quarantine, has started virtual jams. He's picked up a new instrument that we talk about. We also talk about things like individual accountability and responsibility on the bandstand to make a really killing group as a whole. And we even kind of reference a little bit about Will Ferrell movies and how some of those sentiments can influence how we play and our approach to our musicianship in general, which I think is, some really great clickbait for the show very early on. We'll make sure to keep that on the headline. But anyways, this was a great episode. If you want to check out more of what Paul is doing, you can go and check him out on Facebook. He does a lot of kind of daily live videos with playing both trombone and playing trumpet, the secondary instrument he's picked up over the course of coronavirus. And it was just an all-around really great episode. So I won't say too much about it. You can just dive right in. A few quick announcements. Last week we announced that the new album, which is Between Love and Fascination, my new record, is coming out on July the 24th, which is 2 weeks from now. But tomorrow, Friday, July 10th, 2 weeks ahead of its release, it is going to be available for pre-order on iTunes and such. So keep an eye out for that. And if you want to order a physical copy, you can go over to christianwiggs.com/store and check out, if you want to support in that way and get a physical copy. I'm old school. I love having, a CD and record collection. So, but that's just me. Either way, it'll be available physically, it'll be available digitally, and we'll have more announcements and another trailer coming out soon for that. Last week's episode was with Daniel Dufour. Keep supporting that record if you haven't checked it out yet. Standards, it's super, super great. And he has a really excellent story of his craziest gig story that involves a tornado, barbecue, and having to play in the rain. It's all you could want. Go check it out and also support this week's episode, which is Paul Deemer. That is it for me. Kind of a short intro than last week where we were kind of explaining everything that's going on. One last thing, if you have any questions for future guests and you want to learn more about them, you can go to christianwiggs.com/offthebandstand, and there is a form submission where you can submit different questions. You can put your name and what your question is in a message box in your email, and we'll make sure to include that in kind of like a Q&A session once those start rolling. So anyways, super grateful that you guys are supporting this. This has been so much fun, very therapeutic. It has helped me get my social time in with all my friends. So I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. And I hope you guys are staying safe. So anyways, without further ado, here is episode 2, Paul Deemer. This is Off the Bandstand.
What's up, man?
Hey, man. That's gonna be the very start of this, man. Just bop, and then, hey, man, how's it going? All right. I think I
was
lost.
checking out. I hope my internet connections are.
Now you're good. What's up, man? How are you?
Well, I'm hanging. Let's just see how my internet connection fares for now, and if need be, if we keep hitting issues or having issues, I can. Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry, I was saying so still. Just trying to be so respectful. Well, cool, man. I don't know if you're having a drink, but I'm gonna have a drink. This is we have a very unofficial sponsor. It's just a friend of mine. His name's Anthony Acosta. I told him I'd give him a shout out. So thanks to Anthony for this beautiful bottle. Man, it's like this. What was it? It's like a bourbon that is between like a Japanese and Kentucky blending bourbon. So it's really cool.
Cool.
Anyways,
Awesome.
enough about that. Man, how's it going? How are you hanging in there?
7% alcohol. By
Is that your drink for the evening?
It's my, it keeps me everything safe and clean and sanitized. I've been sober for a year and a month.
Oh, well, man, I that's amazing. Congratulations. I'm also so sorry that I brought that up. I didn't know.
Oh no,
And
it's
also, if it is makes you uncomfortable to have it, then I can totally just like table it.
no, you're good.
Okay,
You're good to
cool.
go, man. Not at all.
Well, man, thanks so much for doing this. Like, how have you been through like all the quarantine stuff? Like, I've seen you've been up to a bunch of like really cool stuff, and we'll like get to that in a bit. Just like, but tell me how you're doing.
I'm all right. It's day by day. A lot of the strategy is just to take it a day at a time and a moment at a time, and just kind of toggle between macro and micro, as far as perception, because both can get a little like heavy, if you exist in one too much or get carried away. But yeah, man, I'm trying to practice, and learn things. And it's like a lot of people have been saying, it's been nice to step off of the ride or the train or whatever you want to call it for a little bit and like get a sense of where you're at.
Totally fair, man. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been really nice because I think like with all of us, like I was talking to Dufour yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and we were saying that like we are all like with just whenever we're straight gigging musicians, like it can be when we're just like going and going and going, just hitting the bandstand like night after night and just doing all these different hits, it can be like really tiresome. And so like for a little bit there, it was nice because we got like some time off and we were like, okay, we can like focus on some other things. We can spend some more time in the shed and like focus on like personal relationships and stuff. But then after a certain amount of time of that, it kind of starts to feel like, ooh, now I need to get like a little bit more involved and do some other things. And it's definitely like, that's kind of what spawned this whole thing, right? Because it's like, well, we say like 70%, 80% of the gig is a hang, right? But we can't have the gig right now, so we might as well have the hang, which is where this came from. So
yeah, it's a great idea. And it's the hang is essential to try to get regardless if you're on a gig or not, just for general sanity, socialization, all the stability that, since a lot of us are quarantining, socially distancing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, like I told Dufour yesterday, I've been telling everybody like this is really just like an informal hang, right? It's just us chatting, talking about what we've been up to, ideas, thoughts on things, giving ourselves a platform to talk about the things that we want to talk about that would bore most audiences, I guess, whenever, because they're just there to listen to music. So, but man, you've been busy. So like at the beginning of quarantine, you kind of like took it upon yourself to do, I think it was at the same time, like Monday nights, right? Doing like the jams, right?
Yeah, I was throwing everything with the help of my partner, who's throwing everything at the wall, like to see. I really wanted to jump into the notion of pivoting and trying things that were out of my comfort zone and just trying new things in general. And that was one of them, and just seeing, what would come of it. But, I had to taper that off, and a couple of other things. I tried a handful of things. There was like some Instagram challenges that was like a fad for a little bit, and I tried it. And I think a lot of it's, it feels like an extension or a result of like some of my ADD and like, or ADHD, where I start a ton of things and just never finish them. So that it's a little bit of that, but also everything else that's going on. But yeah, I try to jump into all of it.
Yeah, man. So like, how was that going whenever you had like the jams? Like, cause I guess I tuned in a few times and saw like some people doing stuff. Were you trying to have like tracks on at any time and then have people like blow over that if they didn't have like iRealB or stuff like that? Or were you just having it to where they would just kind of accompany themselves? Or like, what was for people who haven't seen it, what ended up working the best?
Well, it was I try to keep it loose and not too rigid, which would allow for, a good flow. And it could be anywhere. Yeah, somebody could use a play along and just, do their thing with like the YouTube jazz, learn jazz standards tracks, or if they had an I real beat, or if they wanted to do something a cappella. But I was like, I guess I was specifically intrigued and drawn by the notion of having to rely on yourself, you know, and not a rhythm section. And I mean, it just puts a lot of onus. I think that format, for me, the way I was thinking about it, it forced the onus or whatever on the whoever was taking part to really like keep track of the form and all this stuff while still making it musical. And of course, it's very lofty. And you know, myself and a lot of us, you know, we just did our own thing. But that was the initial kind of approach. I was just, you know, I feel like it's the responsibility for the musician to be able to perform a musical whole by themselves. It's like, that's just my own principle. Like if you're a musician, then I think it should be possible, or it should be, you know, almost required, for lack of a better word that I can think of right now, for a musician to be able to sit down and present a musical whole, even without an instrument, right? Like it's just something, right? So that's where that was coming from, long story short.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Because I think there is like a certain and this isn't by like any fault of their own, but with like younger musicians, there is kind of a feeling of like, yeah, I'll like work up, you know, a certain amount of stuff, but then I'll like get on the bandstand and then it won't be all eyes on me, and I'll be able to kind of depend upon the group setting as well. But at a certain point, I mean, if you're playing with cats that are like much better than you, or much more like experienced than you, then you might be able to get away with that for a time, but then they'll kind of like notice who the weak link is. But if you get a bunch of people doing that together in one group, then it's all just kind of this equal dependency that doesn't result in like a strong, because like we've heard, you know, bands or like combos, whatever, play like Blue Bossa and like Way You Look Tonight, or like All of Me and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, you're playing changes, you're doing this, you're doing that, but it's not there. You know, there's like not a vibe that you're looking into. So yeah, definitely something to be said about just being like, yeah, you need to be able to present something as a whole yourself. So that way whenever you bring that into the bandstand setting, there's like a whole, you know, other thing going on.
Sure. Yeah. It's almost like running with weights on, you know, for training. And that way, when you get to the actual event or the performance, like it just feels like a breeze. Like you don't have to actually carry all that weight because you have, you know, your bandmates in the moment and everything else. But if you had to, you could. But it makes being on the bandstand with people that much easier, right? If you're able to, if you needed to carry all that weight, then when you're on the bandstand, like it frees up all this mental bandwidth for you to take in the moment. And I feel like that's a huge thing that gets missed. Is like a lot of folks, including myself, miss the forest for the trees in a way. It's almost like having like this wall, and you have these bells, right? And you have to climb the wall and hit and like tap the bells and ring them, right, to go to the next one. And you go all the way, and you get to the second to last one and ring it, and then just jump off, like come back down like you're finished. But you missed the last one, and that last bell represents like it being musical, remembering that like you're presenting and sharing a musical concept to other people, like you're convinced. It's like I did all these things and these hoops, and that's it.
See, I think you lost you for just a quick second. See if we can get you back real quick. It's like a perfect pose though for the frozen screen. Okay, perfect. I got you back. It was like a perfect frozen screen though. You're like, it's like that meme that was like aliens.
I might have to move closer to my, I'm going to walk us closer to, I'm going to take.
Sure, whatever you need to do, man.
My trumpet. Safe.
Whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to get closer to the device. But yeah, I was just saying, you know, it's that last spell that like a lot of folks seem to forget. It's like the whole point that we're there. It's you know, I was also thinking of, it's funny, let's see if the vision is of my kitchen. I was also thinking of like those word games or word puzzles where you have like fragments of a word and they're spelled phonetically. And so you present it to somebody, right? It's like a puzzle. and there's like 3 chunks of it. And then each chunk has like a phonetic sound that it represents. And so someone puts them all together and they're actually saying a word, and the puzzle is they have to figure out what word it is, right? And so I feel like a similarity is just like making the sound of those 3 fragments together and saying the word and sounding like you're saying a word, but you didn't solve the whole puzzle. You don't know what word you're actually saying. You're just repeating the phonetic chunks or whatever. Yeah. Anyway,
anyone who tuned into the first episode, and I'll try not for continuity's sake, just to or not continuity, but to not like repeat myself a ton, but just because the second episode, I'm like, it's fine. But I was telling D4 yesterday that Matt Maldonado, whenever I was first starting to scat and do improvising and stuff like that, he was using the analogy of like, yeah, you could, as a musician, like go up and start improvising and put in a bunch of licks that you know. But if you were to translate those to words and you're just throwing out all the licks you know in a certain given time, it's like saying TV stand, television, Blu-ray, Xbox, PS4, piano. He's like, or you could say like a full sentence of like, my TV is sitting on top of the stand, which is next to the Xbox. There's Blu-rays over there, and yada, yada, yada. So then it's like a cohesive statement as opposed to just throwing together like a hodgepodge of like, yeah, I kind of know all of these things, and I'll just hope I can put them together and stick, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of like that Will Ferrell skit of like The Matrix, where he's like, vis-a-vis, ergo, and he's just like saying the words just to say them. And that's like what it feels like sometimes when very much like you were saying, it's like very non sequitur, like it's almost gibberish or random stuff. But it's like another way I think about it is it's like people are saying flat 9, bebop lick number 3, sharp 11, instead of like, I'm somebody's brother and this is our relationship, like telling an actual story. And that's something that a Herbie Hancock video that I saw really helped me understand. It's like we're so much more than what's written in these books and these numbers. Like he's like, I'm actually a father, a husband, a son, et cetera. And so like it would be a shame to just go up on stage, which is a huge privilege in and of itself, and just spew out academic letters. What a fucking waste, like, come on, it's such an opportunity to be able to get up there and tell your story. So yeah, very much. Yeah.
I think there was something I was listening to whenever Branford was putting out the Upward Spiral album in like 2015. He was going around, he was doing a bunch of interviews and like a press junket about it, and he was just saying that sometimes people try to get on stage and they just try to play like the most heady shit possible because they think that there's going to be a bunch of academics in the crowd too. He's like, when like it comes down to it, like, I mean, if we were to go anywhere in town, like we could go to like the 2 biggest jazz hubs, which are like, we could go to Elephant or we could go to Parker, which is arguably like the 2 biggest places that jazz is happening in town. And, you're going to have like some other musicians who come to like check you out, or like young cats who are like not in the scene yet, who are like wanting to like absorb and learn. But very rarely are you going to have like a bunch of people in there that are like, oh yeah, I love what you did over that. It's just going to be like, oh yeah, I liked the sound. Or there is, some dude who's on a date and wanted to look sophisticated. So he's like, you want to go listen to some jazz? Like a little Jerry Seinfeld bit.
Right. And that's a great point. Like, what are most, like, we're trying to connect with people and share our story. Like, what are people going to, what's a parallel going to be? Like, what's going to resonate with other human beings? Like sharp 9, flat 9, or like, my grandmother died last year. Like
Sure.
It's actually emotional and an emotional resonance rather than like this.
Yeah, man. I think there's a really good point to that too about just I don't know, like you can do a lot of different things in your music, but if you're not emoting, right? And you could play like the same lick over and over and over again. And yeah, maybe some musicians would start to get like bored with it after a certain amount of time. But like if it feels good and you feel like you're like telling a story within that and you're making it different enough every time you play that lick, or if it's just like a pattern that you're doing, there's something that you can like transmit through that with your emotions to make it to where, you know, the person will be like, I don't know what you're playing, but I understand it. Like I understand the feeling of what you're getting at, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. And like, so, you know, I just watched, this is silly, but I just watched this movie, that Eurovision movie, another Will Ferrell reference
Yeah.
here. And it's an odd movie. There's I like the music in it, and it's just kind of weird. It looks like it was a passion project, you know, and he doesn't have to care if it's good or not. It was probably fun for them to make.
Yeah.
But within that movie, it's about him and Rachel McAdams' character competing in a music like competition, the Eurovision competition. And she has this line in there that like resonated with me. She was like, and I don't remember it verbatim, but I remember the feeling I got when I heard it. And it was like, yeah. And basically he was amounting the sum of his being to the result of that competition. And so he was like he was losing perspective of really important things in life. And she pointed that out and called him on it kind of. And she was like, you're more than this competition, like not better, like it's not like the competition is beneath you, but you're more than that. And that kind of like anything that gets us upset for me, like, and it happens to me a lot. It's something that I have to, you know, one of my challenges is like not letting things get to me to a certain point. And I think it's because briefly in that moment, like whatever is happening with my ego, I feel that I'm not like that. The sum of me is like equal to whatever's pissing me off. Like I forget that like that's not me, the entirety of me. And I think it's the same thing with academic playing. You know, when you spend hours and dollars and days and all, you know, all the dedication to academia and the theory of music and being Mr. Jazz, then after a certain point, it's like almost like an indoctrination of equating the entirety of you to academic jazz. And that's like that, what you said reminded me of that, where it's like, well, don't forget that, you know, just because you've sunk your identity into this thing for years, that's not the sum of who you are. You're more than that. And it's just repeating what we've already said, but in a slightly different way.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there was a large portion of, and I mean, I think this started to happen, especially once I was diving more into improvisation, but I would like leave certain gigs, good or bad, thinking like, well, I'm only as good of a musician as my last gig. So if I totally like shit the bed on the bandstand and like, you know, took a chorus like up top on the first tune and like I was like, oh yeah, like, you know, I felt good about whatever I did. And then the next tune, it like becomes like gambling, where like the next tune you're like, oh yeah, like I don't know the changes that well, but I'll like blow over them because I had good ideas before. And then you run out of your go-to licks and then you can't hear anything else. And then you're like, well, damn it. Now I can't stop on that one. Now I have to redeem myself, which is how the guy leaves Vegas with zero money in his pocket and a soon to be very pissed off wife, you know? So like there's that feeling, but, and I think that's like what you said really holds a lot of merit because we can't get caught up with like the whole side of academia, but the thing that makes it a double-edged sword is that like we have to do all of that deep dive into academia first before we can start relaxing, because if we just try to go up all nonchalantly, then it becomes like any musician who ever shows up to a jam and just like brought his horn was like, I'm one of the guys, you know, but like didn't do his homework. So it's this feeling of like you have to do your homework, but then you can't indoctrinate yourself in feeling like everything's academia, and if I don't always adhere to the rules of academia, then I'm like failing. Because at a certain point you focus so far on the side of making it like a science and making it like a you know, as perfectly tied up in a bow, you know, present, that you forget to actually put some care into like what you're doing too. So
sure. And yeah, and that inhibits imagination and creativity too, like where you are too attached to rules and guidelines and lanes and everything, and you can lose sight of the creative endless boundaries of music where, once all that stuff is a means to an end, not an actual end. And once you learn the means, then you can forget about them, right? That's what they always say.
Yeah.
And that feels similar to like a lucid dream, or like, it's something I've talked about a lot with my students, where we've had those dreams where we wake up, or we have the dream, right? And let's say it's someone like says something in the dream, or something happens to where I'm embarrassed, or like whatever it is, like I'm threatened in that way, like not anything nonviolent or whatever, maybe so, but I wake up after and I'm like, damn it, if I knew it was a dream, I would have done this, this, and this, right? And so that's kind of like how I feel about these limitations that we ascribe or subscribe to.
Sure.
These lanes that aren't hard, they're not strict, they're not concrete, and like it's actually like you don't have to abide by those things, and it's actually kind of just a dream. And now that you've learned these things, let go of them, and you can like have a lucid dream on stage or whatever. Like that fear is, if we revisit our those fears or those apprehensions and really face them, investigate them, we'll find that a lot of them aren't really legitimate at all, and that it's something that we've imposed on ourselves. And it's a shame that we're our own worst enemies, but that's just fucking the human condition. So
yeah. And plus too, I mean, when you think about it, if there's like any motivator as a jazz musician or just a musician in general to not be all caught up in that fear, is that I'm pretty sure we can say definitively that no one has ever swung out of fear. Like nobody's ever been like super scared on the bandstand and then like swung their ass off. Right. Like it's going to be evident in your playing. So there has to be this, like, we were talking about just in the past couple of days, me and a couple of friends, about how like the place to be apprehensive and the place to be more calculated and like hard on yourself is the shed. And then once you hit the bandstand, it's kind of like everything's out the window, because nothing other than just relying on my ear and then understanding the vibe that like the group is setting, nothing's going to help me. Other than that, it's a sink or swim mentality. And I don't think we ever like lose the fear of the bandstand entirely, but there is a feeling of where it just starts to go away as we've done more of the necessary work before.
True. Yeah, that's one of the best ways to get over that stage fright is like practice and that the shed and reinforcement. And you're totally right. Like the shed is for when you use the brain, when you're thinking. The bandstand is not, because of that sink or swim or fight or flight, as well, a lot of people refer to that, where thinking is too slow, and that crosses over into car racing, BMXing, skateboarding, fighting, all of these performance relate NBA. If you're thinking about shit, it's too late. You're done. You want to do all the thinking in the shed, because that's just the way we're wired, and it's the same thing with fight or flight. If you think about it, you're literally dead. But luckily, conversely, like, from what you mentioned, like if you're stricken with fear on the bandstand, like you're not going to swing. It's not going to happen. You're going to be rigid and thinking and out of the moment. But conversely, if you're also not going to die on the bandstand either. So that's one of those. But we behave like it though, right? Like, there's so much behavior that's like, oh, if I don't do this, I'm going to die. I'm going to literally die.
Sure. And I think there's definitely like more of a, if you're not a band leader, there's more of that fear, because it's like, well, shit, if I don't throw down, then I'm not going to get the call. I'm not going to get a call back. So there is like probably a healthy amount of fear you need to have, but not, I don't know if I would call it fear, just like a reverence of being like, okay, all these other people are really going at it. All these other people are doing really well. So I need to like bring my best here. But like you said, it's just that balance. I think I can't remember who told me about it, and it may be a completely untrue story. But like the anecdote still stands, is that somebody was saying that somebody was shedding in a practice room. And I think, this may be completely wrong, but I think like Pat Metheny was there at the school to do like a master class or something like that. And he was just like walking up and down the halls, and he was walking up and down the halls and then saw somebody in the practice room playing, and they were like practicing this lick over and over again that they already sounded really great on. And he like knocked on the door and like came in, and he was like, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm like shedding. And he was like, no, you're not. He was like, you're performing for yourself. He's like, that lick already sounds great. You need to start playing shit that you suck at. you know, because like if you're only playing the stuff that you sound good on in the shed, then once you get to the gig where you're playing a 2-3 hour gig, you probably only worked on a few separate things, and you can really superimpose that so many times over whatever like changes are happening before it starts to be like, okay, yeah, this is super derivative, and like I don't know if you have much to say.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, man. And that's not really practicing in that way. Like, yeah, that's a huge thing that I think we've all ran into, where we just kind of get stuck playing with what sounds good in the shed, or just doing play-alongs aimlessly.
Yeah.
You know, which is kind of similar. And that it doesn't make you like elastic, or, you know, like sucking in the shed also practices and reinforces your ability to adapt and what's the boxing thing, stick and move, right? So you're practicing new licks and new scales and new songs and, you know, new harmony, like, and so those things, you're developing those skills with new material, but also the act of doing that is practicing being out of your comfort zone for extended periods of time. And that in and of itself is a valuable skill. It's one of the major tenets of jazz, I think, of improv, is because the moment is going to like have some say infinite like points of like shit. You just can't predict the moment, you know. Yeah. And it's I always fucking quote the Bruce Lee "be like water" thing. Like when you describe somebody just practicing a lick and then expecting like that to prepare them for a gig, it would be, you know, in fight terms, the way I understand it, it would be like thinking that someone is only going to strike me from one point and just focusing on that one thing when I go into the fight. What are they going to do? They're going to hit me somewhere else, you know? Like, that's not going to work, man.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think another thing too that can be crippling is whenever something like really cool happens in like this. I listen to a lot of comedy and stand-up comedy because I find that like a lot of the things that they have to say too, and like their experience on their own like respective bandstand right on the stage, like relates a lot to like what we do as well, just being in the performing arts. And I listened to this podcast called You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes. I don't know if you know that comedian. He's really, really funny. But have you ever seen those like College Humor Batman videos?
I've seen, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so that's Pete Holmes. But yeah, so Pete Holmes has this thing. He's like, you know, whenever you try to like something organic happens and it works within an audience and like you didn't plan it and it's like really great and it gets like a huge laugh, or like in our case, like people really dig it. And then you try to recreate that moment several times later on the bandstand and it just like either doesn't work or the magic isn't there or it falls flat. I think that's like another instance of like trying to control things as opposed to just like letting it sit. Like there was like a moment like on a gig you and I were playing together. It was like that graduation party or something about like a year ago, or maybe a little less than a year ago. And I think we were playing It Could Happen to You or something like that. And it was like we did a tag and then like a break for David piano to like do something, and then we both like hit something together, and I just remember being like, oh, this like feels so good, and so then like on like the next gig or something like that, I was like, oh, it felt so good, I had it on like recording like on my phone, and I was like, oh, at the next gig I'll just tell somebody to like hit the 9, I'll hit the sharp 11 or something like that, and it'll work really well. And like even like I was just like so naive, and then it happened, and then I was like, well, this doesn't feel as fun because it's like, yeah, sonically it's pleasing, but it wasn't spontaneous and we didn't know who was going to go where. And then now it feels like this whole thing has become calculated, and it's not like the thing where you laugh afterwards where you're like, oh man, that was badass, like yeah, cool, right. You know. So
yeah, totally. Yeah I guess it's kind of focusing on the wrong thing that happened, like not focusing on, like the takeaway isn't that we landed on a certain beat, playing a certain notes, doing certain this and that, but that in that moment our minds were clear and we landed every strategy in the book, like before I got up on stage. Well, if I tweak this, or if I do this one thing, then maybe then like I'll sound good. Maybe then it'll work, whatever. Right. But the takeaway is like, how do I just have nothing there? And then whatever will happen. And that's, like you're saying, when all the magic has the highest potential of happening, or occurrence or whatever. So
totally agree, man. Man, speaking of the shed though, you've been busy, man. You've picked up an entirely new instrument.
Yeah.
Like daily things, and it's badass, man. I mean, it's just like consistently like sounding so much better and better. And I mean, I tell me this before I go on, like how long have you been playing trumpet, like shedding trumpet?
Well, let's see. I bought this trumpet, I think like 2 years ago in San Francisco. It was like a total impulse buy at this pawn shop. Bought it for like $100.
Cool.
And then I tried it out for like a week, and I just like, I didn't approach it right, and it was too intimidating and all the shit. It just didn't last. It was like if I tried to start going to the gym, like I gave up, you know. And then I didn't touch it for I don't know how long, over a year. And then December 2019, I had a gig with this band called Calexico, and they needed multi-instrumentalist trumpet trombone. So I pulled that thing back out and shed for that gig maybe 3 weeks to a month.
Oh, wow.
And then played the gig, did fine on it. And then after that gig, I just kind of put it down again. It just, it's tough. Another be okay with picking up this instrument that was going to affect my main instrument. Like after I played the trumpet, at least initially, whenever I hopped on the trombone, like I didn't have all the technique and tools that I'm used to, and that fucked with me. And it didn't feel good to not have those. And in one way, it didn't feel good, but in another way, it was fun to learn how to recover. It was a lot of recovery.
Yeah.
How to recover from a mistake without telegraphing it. That was a nice skill to develop through that period, both like because I sucked at trumpet, and so I had to figure out recovery and actually learning how to simplify things too, so I didn't play out of my skill level. And then with trombone, like when I didn't have, you know, the technique because of trumpet playing, I had to figure out ways how to roll out of that too, which was fun, but you know, I could only do that so much, and some gigs it's not appropriate to do that, to like test that out and work on that skill of fucking up, you know. So I put it down again. So I think at that point I'd played it for about a month, and then when this quarantine happened is when I really jumped into it, because there's no gigs for me to like prepare for really, and I don't a performance because there aren't really any performances. So whenever the quarantine started was when I like really fucking stepped into it and remained consistent. I think I might have left out a week at one point, but other than that, it's semi-regular, you know, as regular as I can make it. But yeah, man. So maybe like 4 to 6 months, somewhere in there.
Yeah, man. Well, I was going to say, it's just like every time that I like tune into your things where you're like playing, I'm like, man, it just like sounds better and better. Like the tones there. And then also like, I guess like, and I mean this in like the most praising way, I guess I was like surprised like at how quickly like you were able to like get vocabulary on it too. Cause like that's like going from an instrument that is like slide based to knowing all the fingers. Cause like with trumpet, obviously you have to have not only a mindset of like, what do I hear and what do I want to play? But then it's like, okay, then there's like the added thing of like transposition, which like, you know, any versatile member on the bandstand should be able to transpose, but then also like doing it on that other instrument where it's already kind of done for you. And then also knowing like all of the fingerings as well, and being able to put that together whenever you're in like a medium swing or like up tempo swing thing and trying to get like vocabulary out. So I guess for people who are listening to this, who are also trying to maybe make that jump into other things, like if they're, you know, like a pianist that also wants to learn some brass stuff, or if they're a woodwind that also wants to learn some of that, like what was that process like for you, and how did you get it like concrete to where it like made sense in your brain to like just totally like switch gears from one instrument to the other?
Sure. Well, I think part of what helped me, and I'm not going to try to hide the fact that I learned baritone in middle school during band camp between like sixth and seventh grade, I think it was. And so I just, for some crazy reason, like the valves of the baritone stuck with me, like the fingering, like it never went away after that. So it was kind of weird, but that's how it was. The transition wasn't as difficult for me because I somehow retained the like learning those fingerings back in middle school. So that helped a fuckload. But I guess, through my journey on trombone, I've had to like undo and rework and start over because of a lot of bad habits and misconceptions. As a young student, non-adult, even like all this stuff, I didn't have the same experience and perception or whatever that I do now at the end, at like wherever I'm at in my journey. So I can take all those growing pains and those hard to learn lessons that I, took years on the trombone, and just take the heart of those lessons. And then now I don't have to like spend all that time hitting my head against the wall on the trumpet, right? Like I learned that as far as improv, to learn music and everything by ear. And that maybe in a micro sense that like when you're sitting down doing it, it takes longer and it might be a little bit more daunting with you. It's more musical. It's more, it addresses a larger multitude of musical muscles, for lack of a better term, right? Than just learning something off a page. And we've all heard this a bunch of times, but it took me a long time to figure that shit out. And same thing with groove. Like I've spent years trying to understand groove and time within time and sounding good with style and phrasing. Like that took forever. But now that I've got however far that I have come in those categories, like I don't have to start all over on trumpet. So luckily I can just take those lessons and just keep them in mind. And, I have to be self-aware, and not just mindless practicing, or else I slip into bad habits again. But everything from trombone, I carry it. It's music. It's all just music. And right. Everything, this thing is, as long as I have it up here, sonically, what do they call that? Audiation, then I'm good to go. But
yeah, I completely agree, man. And like all of that is really, really great that you were able to just like transfer that from one to the other. I think like a big part of that idea, not speaking directly to like your experience, but like a big part of that idea is kind of what you touched on, is just like using your ears on everything, right? Because like with piano, right? Like I am not a pianist, but whenever I was I was a sophomore, the second semester freshman or first semester sophomore in college, there was a music studio that I still teach at. It's like down in Kyle. And then they like brought me in because I had been recommended, and they were like, yeah, like you should just like pick up like this person who's leaving, pick up all their students. And I was like, well, I don't think you realize like I've never taught before. I don't like do all this different stuff. And I was like, they were like, do you play piano? Because you'll need to accompany your students. And I was like, I can play like root position triads and that's it. And don't like get weird on me. I was like, just like, I can play the most simple version of Jingle Bells. It was for like, it must've been the first semester sophomore year, because it was coming up on Christmas time and like that music. And I remember then like picking up these students, and they were like, no, we're going to hire you. It was like the worst job interview ever. I was like, you don't want to hire me. Like, I'm not ready. Like I have so much more work to do. And they were like, no, you're going to do it. And so then like that first day, or like that first week, I had like 12 students right off the bat. And I like couldn't play piano much at all, but like we've all been students. And like, as much as we have like a reverence for our teachers, we're also kind of waiting for them to fuck up a little bit. Like we're always like waiting to see them just like, we want to be able to call bullshit on them at some point, even if we don't know that much. And so I was like in a room one-on-one with students, and I was like, I can't hide here. Like, I have to really know my stuff. So in addition to putting in all that time to practice and then like understand groove and style and stuff like that, it wasn't so much sitting there the entire time. It was like listening to all of these like pop and contemporary and then jazz stuff for like all the different things that the students wanted to do. The only thing that I like wouldn't really attempt that much was like classical music, because I'm not gonna like read like all this, like contrapuntal shit. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Sorry. But yeah. And so I think like that translates a lot whenever you're picking up a new instrument. Is just, you have to use your ear and you have to relate it to what you know. Because if you don't have like a reference point, then it's kind of just like throwing things at the wall and hoping there's going to be a fluke and letting it stick. But yeah. So anyways, about that.
No, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and it helps that trombone's a brass instrument too, and it incorporates an embouchure and wind, right? So there's some similarities. But yeah, dude, this mouthpiece is so small, and that was the huge issue for me, and it still is.
Yeah.
The difference between the embouchure or aperture size, and it kind of clicked maybe a week or two ago to focus more intently, like the musculature in my embouchure. If you can see, like, imagine arrows pointing this way to make it more narrow.
Yeah.
For be able, you play trumpet too, right?
I do, yeah. What I always tell my trumpet students, and for anybody listening, I'm definitely not an authority on trumpet. I play trumpet, I play flugelhorn, I bring it out on a few gigs. I'm playing like a duo or trio thing. But what I tell my students whenever they're like trying to figure out, especially beginners, is I say like, picture like that your mouth and your lips in the corner right here are 4 different corners. So it's like boom, 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 and bring those together to make like a diamond. So that way it's a very concentrated feeling. And then like I tell them that their embouchure and the way that they make their sound and their buzz is just it's like a back and forth constant war between keeping your lips tight so air can't get out, and having your air be so direct that it's like fighting to get out. And through that, they'll make the buzz. Obviously, like, this is stuff that you already know, but for people listening, that's kind of like the mentality of what I guess trumpet players, or at least me, I'll say that. I won't generalize trumpet players, but what I try to focus on when I'm making my sound.
Yeah, trying to figure out the most efficient way to set up your embouchure, your aperture, and incorporate or move air through the horn in a way that makes a beautiful tone and that gives you access to as much range of the instrument as you can. Like, you have to find that sweet spot in so many areas, and it's just a journey of figuring out where that is, especially since all of our bodies are different, so it's helped. Like, learning trumpet has helped with my brass pedagogy, like brass conceptual approach. So like, I brought a lot of stuff back from trumpet playing, like this journey on trumpet, back to trombone, regarding articulation, because a lot of the trumpet articulation is ba-da, like tongue slur.
Sure.
It's a little bit different than trombone, than what I used to do. But now I've incorporated some of that philosophy to trombone phrasing, legato phrasing, and also the tongue shape. I think since the trumpet seems to be such a smaller like scale of size to the trombone, any sort of physical adjustment has like a magnified effect on your setup as a whole. So when I use like tongue shape, it has a more significant impact on what I'm doing on the trumpet than on the trombone. So I never really incorporated that on the trombone, at least not very consciously. But then when I started playing trumpet, I had to like be able to access some of these higher range stuff. And I was like, fuck, I guess this does work. And then I took it back to trombone, and that was a nice little breakthrough as well.
Yeah, man, it's crazy how much like you can learn about like different things and different styles just by being versatile and trying to play like multiple different things, even if like you're not like a virtuoso at like all these different things, but having a more informed like ability and a more informed like scope of just the music in general and how you can create that music through different mediums, whether that be like instruments or voice or whatever. Yeah, man, Totally agree. What are you playing on? I'm curious. What mouthpiece are you playing on?
Oh, this is a bigger mouthpiece, for my face. A trombone setup. It's a Warburton. I just got it at Gin. Warburton 1D, and the backbore is an 8-star. So okay. The explanation was it's a larger mouthpiece and it's for like an orchestral sound.
Oh, cool.
So and it seems to work out like great for me. It fits my face. It like out of all the mouthpieces that I tried, like that was the one that just felt great, and sounded good. And yeah, man.
I think there's something to be said there too about this kind of like old school mentality that it's like, no, you just have to kind of like, force yourself to learn how to play on like certain mouthpiece. I mean, there is also the thing of like where people try to do a cop out and they just like play on a mouthpiece and they're like, nope, it's the mouthpiece. Like, got to throw this one out, got to get a new one in here. But there is also like something to be said about like, you really have to find what's best for you, right? Because we're all different. Like we all have like different sized lips. We all have like different stuff going on. So it's like, you have to find what is going to be the most convenient and the most appropriate, like for your, not only the sound you're going for, but just like the constructs of your body and your instrument. So yeah, man.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to get to, because this also is kind of serving as a way for like people to get to know not only just like our thoughts and opinions, but like get to know more of the story of each of us, because we get to get each other like at the gig, right? And like people get to see us play the gig, but and I don't think like any of us in town are like profoundly like antisocial, but after the gig, we're kind of just focused on like, how long is the line going to be at Whataburger? Like, because we want to like go get some food or we want to like go sleep or something like that. So there's not always that time to like get into like big conversations. So, and it can be however like short or long, but like, tell me about like where you came up and then like what were like your earliest influences of jazz, or did you hear somebody play, or was it just like happenstance that it was like, no, the school had this program and I wanted to do this, and that's history.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess quickly, there's no rush, but El Paso, like my shirt says, repping hometown. That's where I was born and raised, on the west side of El Paso. And at that time, I was born in 1986. So I grew up before, like, I grew up when there was dial-up, before cell phones. Okay,
cool.
sorry.
I got you back. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I was just saying that there was, because of that, that the technology at that time, and El Paso's like, man, it's from Austin, it's almost 10 hours. So, it was just behind in a lot of ways, and we're just kind of secluded out there in this old, it was just a place that people passed through on their way to California or on their way back, hence the name of the city. But that really shapes, or at least then shaped, a lot of the culture and the attitude there, where El Paso is mañana, and people are so kind and beautiful, and they'll have you in their home. They're so generous. There's like this, both kind of a Southern hospitality, but also this like a Mexican type of hospitality too. That's beautiful there. But we're, at that point, I don't know. It's, I guess, long story short, I didn't have access to jazz or Grammy bands, or a youth jazz band, or any of these competitions, these amazing things that are happening now. Like, it was just kind of this old Mexican desert city, and we just figured out what we could. And so, that being said, I got into improvised music in high school, and I was listening to, believe it or not, like Fish, like jam bands and stuff.
Cool. Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. And my first experience improvising was playing along with Life on Planet Groove, this Maceo Parker album, with Kenwood Denard and Larry Goldings, this amazing jazz on that. Obviously, Maceo Parker, Kim Maisel, Candy Dolfer guested on that. Yeah, but I mean, that album was awesome. And I was obsessed with the drums then too. I actually wanted to play the drums before I ever wanted to play trombone.
Really?
But that was, but that was kind of my start, in high school. Just like we did have we're still in Texas. So there was marching band and jazz band and UIL and, all the competitions and everything. So, we did our little jazz band thing, but I kind of I got hit with the bug with, improv through like jam bands and Maceo Parker, and my dad actually bought me a couple of jazz albums too that really helped.
What were those jazz records, if you remember them?
Yeah, he got me, man, he was like very intuitive. He got me the Imminent J.J. Johnson album, Volume 1.
Oh, cool.
That was one of the very first ones he got me. He got me this Bill Watrous album. It has like this like purple, black, and like tan or white color zigzag design on the album cover. That was really cool. And Kind of Blue, I think he got for me as well. And those were, I didn't understand it, man. At that point, I couldn't tell the difference between Coltrane and Cannonball. Couldn't tell when one started and one ended.
Yeah.
And with the JJ album, I didn't really, like, JJ's playing didn't do shit for me at that point, right? I didn't know anything. And I fell instantly in love with Clifford Brown. So that was it. That was it Clifford was the man. And,
I think one of the first jazz records, first like instrumental jazz records that I listened to all the way down was Study in Brown, their Brown and Max Roach record. I mean, it's just like, you talk about just like banger after banger after banger after banger.
Yeah.
And that was like in high school. But yeah, anyway, sorry, not to interrupt.
No, not at all. Yeah, like that. Yeah, and Clifford has touched so many people and has shared his gift, and been that catalyst for so many musicians. There's a reason why, and that just to point out as well that later on, I definitely am. I love JJ. He's one of my main influences. As far as the past of the tradition is, JJ and Curtis and Slide Hampton. I love very much. Those three cats are top, top tier and top on my list for influences and people whom I've transcribed. But it's kind of funny that it's always been, man, my ear has always been attracted to trumpet players, from Clifford to KD to Ryan Kaiser to Tom Harrell to Scott Windholt. I mean, you just name them. Nat Adderley.
Did you see Tom Harrell when he came through town?
I didn't. I think I was working that night. I was really sad about that. Man, fuck. I'm kicking myself.
So I found out about that like the day before it happened. Like it just must have missed it. Like I didn't know he was like gonna come through. And so then the day before they were like, yeah, man, Tom Harrell's gonna be in San Antonio. And I was like, shit. And they were like, are you doing anything tomorrow night? And I was like, yeah, I've got this bistro gig. And like, I think if there's ever a gig I could cancel, it would probably be this one. Like, I think I should just cancel this gig. And I was like, no, because I don't want to like just be like, yeah, sorry, something came up, 24 hours notice, I got to bail, Right. But like to this day, I'm like, I mean, it was 6 months ago, but I was just like, shit, man, like should have seen that show. But yeah, man, that what's that? I think the first Tom Harrell record that I listened to was Paradise.
Okay.
That kind of blue one of him with, it's like an older age. I think it was, I don't know, it must have been 15 years ago, something like, maybe older, I don't know. But yeah, man, that's amazing that you were like drawn towards trumpet players. I think I'm a little bit more drawn towards trumpet players when it comes to transcriptions, because maybe it's just like maybe it's a fear thing of like the saxophone players, but there's just like so much, right? And I think saxophone is kind of designed to be an instrument where it's just like cram as much shit in there as possible, even if it's all killing. But like I think their trumpet doesn't have that luxury, and so they kind of have, like, trumpet players have the added challenge of being like, okay, you need to say just as like relevant shit as the sax player, but you have more limitations to do so, and you need to like make the most of what you do have. Although I feel like somebody who kind of defies that thing of like, you can say less with trumpet because of like vowels, and that thing is Mike Saylor's, because every time I listen to Mike Saylor's play, it's just like, it's just like super kill, and so I'm like, well, shit, maybe I need to eat my words a little bit. But yeah. That was like definitely.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, Mike's amazing, and we have some similar tastes in trumpet players. I remember us both kind of talking about KD and some Ryan Kaiser and Tom. Yeah, when he lived here before, I think we were both kind of going back and forth about Tom for a minute. But yeah, another guy that kind of, well, Wynton, of course, has all the chops in the world, but then Sean Jones is pretty ridiculous too.
Yeah, man.
God, just like tons of chops. Unreal, man. But
man, it's crazy too, like the amount of people who or like the group of people that Sean Jones gets together for that NYO Jazz. Have you like checked that thing out?
Haven't actually.
So NYO Jazz is like 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, like people who are like not yet, maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's not like out of high school, but basically it just like puts together this like all-star band of just like all like the best people in the nation. And there's actually a trumpet player who is up in New York now at Juilliard, and she was in NYO Jazz, and her name's Summer Camargo. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's got like chops for days, like is really, really absolutely incredible. And I just went up in January to New York to the Jazz Congress thing that they had at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and they had this shit, I'm gonna go blank on the names now, but they had like all these discussions and these panels, and it was John Faddis, Sean Jones, there's this female trumpet player that I'm going blank on her name now. It's like super killing. She's blonde.
Did you play with Maria Schneider?
I think so.
I'm forgetting her name right now too.
We'll put it in the comments later. We'll just be like, it was this person. There was her, and then Wynton Marsalis, and
Ingrid
then
Jensen?
Huh?
Was it Ingrid Jensen?
I don't think it was Ingrid Jensen. I'll check it out. It's like somewhere, and I'll send it to you. But and then it was like Summer Camargo, and so it's like all of these like incredible like titans of everything, and then also like Summer, who's like really, really great. But it was just like people who were, you know, like not much older, but like some people much older, like John Faddis, and then like all these people who are like super, super crazy experience. And then she was also there. They invited her to come be on the panel. And then at one point, I remember John Faddis like stopped, and he was like, I don't know if you guys are like wondering who this is. He's like, but her name is Summer Camargo. And if you don't already know who she is, you will very soon. And I thought there was like that super awesome camaraderie and like building up of being like, we're issuing in like the next generation of people, and they're like also super killing. Like she did that West End Blues Challenge thing that everybody was doing for a while, and I mean just like killing the I can't remember how I got there, but I'm sure it was something at least semi.
Yeah.
That's next, right? That's next on the trumpet vlogs, right? Just do it. So the West End Blues Challenge.
I've you know, I wanted to try then, but I wasn't nearly capable. That whenever that happened in quarantine, and I still don't think I am yet, but it's definitely on the list to do for me. So that, yeah, I'd like to get that under my belt one day.
I guess I was gonna ask who like your influences were, but sorry, say that again. I think I lost you there.
You there?
Yeah. Okay, I can hear you. Your face is still frozen, but okay, there you go.
You got it. So I took that opportunity to like sometimes I have these two. I have like 5G and then regular Wi-Fi, and for some reason it hooks me up to the wrong one, and so I have to switch back over so I get the cleanest connector. So I just took that opportunity to do that to the better line.
Cool.
I missed what you asked.
Well, I was just kind of saying, yeah, there were some other things I was going to ask and kind of blanked on them for a second. But we talked about like your influences, right? We talked like about how the people who you really like listening to, trumpet players and trombone players.
Oh yeah.
I guess if there was like a record that you were like, everybody should go check out like right now, like this is the record, go check it out, life changing. And I know that's a tall order question because there's so many. And if there's not a single, then do like top three. Like at least that have been super influential in your life, like in your journey of playing.
Sure. I mean, I guess a lot of the influences that have been in my mind recently are kind of compositional influences.
Okay.
And one album that I always go back to is this Rebecca Martin album. Shoot, what is it called? She's like sitting on a chair with a guitar, and it almost looks like a classical. I think she's holding a guitar.
Okay.
I think it's called The Growing Season, and she's got Larry Grenadier, I think, whom she's married to, and Brian Blade, Kurt Rosenwinkel, and who else is on that? Maybe someone else that I'm missing, but they played her original tunes. And it's the textures, the production, the compositions, the musicianship, it's all just like beautiful and badass. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Brian Blade, like Perceptual and I forgot what the name of the Fellowship stuff, a little bit. But yeah, that's a huge influence. Frank Ocean, compositionally and production wise, is a huge influence for me. Like I'm always hearing the sounds from either Rebecca Martin or Frank Ocean in my mind, like those, like that's always there as a reference, you know. I mean, an album that really I had a really great experience with listening to was the Corey Henry's Funk Apostles album.
Ooh, yeah, man.
With let me see what that one's called. But I think I don't know if he has another.
It was like the purple one, right? Like it was his first one with Funk Apostles.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Let me see. But yeah, that one is like just sonically is and music, all the same things and all the same categories is yeah, Corey Henry, Art of Love, that one.
That's it. Yeah, I was like trying to look it up too. Yeah. Man.
An amazing album. Frou Frou has always been Imogen Heap rather has always been an influence, and that's she's like this kind of pop I don't even know what electronic kind of thing. Nowhere, of course, is a huge influence.
Yeah.
Lewis Cole and Genevieve. A lot of the influences are like outside of jazz, because these are the best I can make of it is that these are folks that are creating original music based off of like the current times.
Yeah.
So because of that, I can relate to that in a different way. You know, like I have, of course, my musical influences with jazz and jazz trombone and jazz instrumentation, everything, and that is beautiful and so influential. But then I that's kind of a zoomed in, very specialized approach or influence. And then if I just, you know, scatter all the pieces and pull back out again and just think about music, a lot of it's not jazz at all. So
yeah.
Yeah, and there's tons more. I just can't think of any, you know, off the top of my head right now.
We'll make like a playlist for each like a Spotify playlist for each guest, and we'll be like, this is all the stuff you should check out. Yeah, we'll put like a link to it. Yeah, man, I think there's a lot to be said about that too. Like me and Dufour were talking yesterday too about how you gotta have always like one step or 1 foot in the past and like 1 foot in the future too, like
right.
what you're gonna do. Because if you look at, you know, like historically, like every decade somebody has been pushing the envelope and making something new, and there's always going to be like naysayers who like just want to like keep to a more like, in the traditional sense of the word, like conservative type thing of like the music that's going on. But it's also like, you know, like if you tried to show like Jaco Pastorius to people in like the 30s or the 40s, I mean, also as the time, but like they'd be like, get out of here with this shit, you know, like no.
otherworldly, I think. Yeah.
For sure. So I think like that also has a great, and another guest who's going to be on like tomorrow is Thomas Winglinski. And like, if you listen to the shit that he's putting out too, I mean, it's like he can play, he's got vocabulary for days. He's like a nasty boy. Like he can play a lot of stuff, but at the same time, he wants to do stuff that's like focused a little more on like the contemporary side of things. And like, no one can deny his writing either. I mean, it's just like really, really great stuff, especially the big band stuff he's been doing for UT. So, cool, man. Well, we definitely need to hang out and get together, not virtually, once this whole thing ends, and make the actual hang. But this will do for the time being. One of the things that we're ending each episode with now is what is your, because we have no shortage of these as gigging musicians, but like if you can think, what is the craziest, most like outlandish bridezilla whatever, or just like on the gig, just like crazy thing happening. Like I heard a story once of, and I'll like leave names out, but like somebody was saying that they were told a story by another person in town where they showed up to a gig where the drummer was blind and the bass player was like super old, and in the middle of the tune the bass player dies. He like falls over on the drummer, and the drummer's blind, but he's just like, hey man, get up, get up, get up. And then they like finish the gig, or they stop finally once they realize shit's gone down, and the paramedics come take the guy away. And then the venue booker comes over and he says, he's like, hey man, so I'm only going to pay you guys for a duo. It was like a trio gig. He's like, I'm only going to pay you guys for a duo. So like we all have these like crazy ass stories, right? But like if you can think, and like no pressure, but if you can think like of what stands out as like this was some crazy.
Let me think. I don't know if I have anything that like extreme. I might have a couple. Like I do remember playing a gig like at the Oasis, I believe, and there was another band playing like next door, and their lead singer, who's a guitarist and sang and is also in a wheelchair, was like having some sort of conflict with another guitarist in the band. Maybe he's the lead guitarist, I think, and the singer was the rhythm. And like he was in his wheelchair and he was singing, and this other lead guitarist, I don't know if he was drunk or just out of it or was like intentionally antagonizing the singer, but he was sitting there and they started like hitting each other like on stage in front of this other band that they saw us there, and we knew, right? Everybody knows everybody. Like we knew we knew each other. And also there's people at the restaurant, and also there's people working at and this was happening. And I like the guys in the band were obviously drunk, and there was this physical altercation on the bandstand in the middle of the song, and the song kept going, and they were just like hitting each other with their guitars, and like it kind of escalated. And like, and they just kept going, man. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? and so I remember that shit for sure. I also remember a gig in Miami when I was very green and pretty incompetent, where I subbed for a friend of mine in this band called Swinolo. And it was on South Beach, and a young, bright-eyed, probably had too many drinks. It was way late at night, and that band is the loudest band I've ever played with. So maybe at 3 a.m., second or third set, my chops are done, gone. I could not hang. I have nothing left. And in the middle of the set, at this huge peak of a loud ass song with all these people, it's fucking Miami nightlife dancing, the lead singer points at me for a solo. And so I take the mic and I just yell in it. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking, man. I was like, fuck it, I can't play. Like, my lips were in pain. I couldn't do anything else. And I was so green that I didn't think to go like this or some other solution, right? Like that would have been more professional. So I thought I could take a scat solo. And unfortunately, I can't scat at that like decibel level. So it just sounded like screaming and like a rock, what I tried to make a rock yelp or something. But I think it was just garbage. And like I probably look like a drunk fool. So that's another experience.
Well, like when you first said that and you said that you yelled, I just like pictured like you just grabbing the mic and like, just like going at it that way. But I don't know, maybe it was somewhere in between a scat solo and that. We'll err on the side of scat solo just to protect reputations.
Oh, I mean, yeah, we all go through our stages of greenness and unprofessionalism and everything. But yeah, that was one of mine. And
man, like I have probably like my most embarrassing story was. Did you know a drummer in town named Adam Reidelbach when he was here?
Yeah, I forgot about him.
Yeah, it's been like a minute. I haven't talked to him in like years, but
with Vintage 15 and stuff, right? Like he was.
Yeah. So he was like doing that hit, and it was like he was there before I was there, and so the very first big band gig, or really like the very first gig I had in Austin, was in 2015, and so we're playing at the Four Seasons. It's this wedding in like the huge ballroom. And this is my first gig with what ended up being my band, right? Vintage 15. But I show up and they gave me about 2 weeks notice for the gig. And they were like, here's 35 songs, memorize them, and then like come on the thing and have them done. But I was already like somebody who like, I did musical theater all growing up. So like the memorization thing was just like part of like it felt like part of the gig, and it felt like part of something I already knew. So I memorized everything, and I was like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to like, I'm going to throw on my nicest suit, and I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to try to throw down. And so, probably if I were to go back, it probably didn't go as well as I thought, but I was like, man, I'm doing great. Like I'm like hitting it, like I'm firing on all cylinders, like everything's going great. And so we get to the last song of the night, and the only song that I didn't look at as much at the lyrics, but I still knew enough to get by, like, and knew most of them, or just like come up with something on the spot, was like the tune That's Life, right? Which is like kind of like a cringy song. Like I hate singing it now, and probably because of the story. But right before the current band leader at the time called That's Life, this bridesmaid comes up to me and she's like, hey, I'm the maid of honor. I'm making the final speech. And I hadn't been to that many weddings, and I certainly hadn't played that many weddings. And so I was like, in my mind, like in that instant, I was like, oh yeah, like that maid of honor speech. Okay, that makes sense. Sure, I'll give you the microphone.
Shit.
No. So I give her the microphone, and then I just hear like, Christian. And I look around, I don't see anybody, and I hear them say it again. And I turn around, it's Adam at the drum set. He's like, come here. And I go over there, and he's like, man, I love you. You're killing, like you're doing great tonight. Like you've really like stepped up to the challenge. You can never, ever do that again. And I was like, what? And he was like, you can never give a drunk woman the microphone. And it was like that, in movies when like, it's like, oh no, and the hallway gets really long and you just see like the whole thing. It was like that. And it was just like, no. And like, I turn and look, and she is just plastered. And she's like, she's got the microphone. She's like screaming into it. But what she had done was she had made her way on stage. I think like Brian Christensen, if you know the sax player Brian, like was on stage, and she kept trying to come over and like put her hand in the bells of people's saxophones and stuff. And it was just like the worst. And so then I look over at the band leader who's in the trumpet section. I'm just like, what do I do? And he was making the announcements. He throws me the other microphone from the back and was like, sing the damn song and don't let her fall. And so they count off 1, 2, ba-boo-dee, boo-dee-dee. And so I'm like, hey, no, like come over here. And she almost like face plants, and I'm like, all right, come right here. Like I'll just like kind of, I guess like lightly make sure you don't fall. And the sound engineer's like right here, like almost like she's gonna go crowd surfing. And I made it through the song. And then I was like, I'm surely never gonna gig with these people ever again, and I'm never gonna live this down. And to this day, I haven't lived it down, but it ended up becoming, I guess, the band that I band lead. So it all kind of worked out, but that was just like, it was poetic the way that it happened. It was just like the worst. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that brings back some trauma for me. Not real, obviously, but like some memories. Yeah. I think a lot of us have played so many of these weddings, and you don't give a drunk person at the wedding a microphone. But the thing is, and also they get up on stage like 3, 4. I've had some of the people in the bridal party or whatever just pick up my horn, and we all have pick up the horn, pick up the guitar, all that kind of put their mouth on my horn, dude, like play my shit, dude. Yeah. These wasted people up there doing that shit. And yeah,
my favorite thing is whenever they come up. I was playing highball one night, and this drunk lady comes up and she's like, hey, like, you should play this song for me, like this song. And like I think it was like some sort of like John Legend song or something, like not jazz. So just something she wanted to hear. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I don't know that song. I didn't even look, but I was just like I saw John Legend. I was like, no, I'm sorry, we don't know that song. We're just like, like I'll talk with the band. We'll see. And then she came up the next song. She was like, no, do you know it? And I was like, no, the band doesn't know it. I don't know it. And she's like, no, it goes like this, and starts singing the song to me. I was like, oh no, like this is not at all how this happens. And then we told her no again. And then I 2 songs later, I'm talking to, I guess it was like David Mescatique at the time. I'm talking to him, and he's like, hey man, and like gives me the heads up, and I turn around. She's on stage. She has pulled up the song, and she tries to put it up to my head on Spotify. And she's like, no, you know this song. I know you know it. And then I kind of looked at the guy in the sound booth at Highball, and I was like, and he like got the bouncer to like come over, and they were like, yeah, ma'am, you have to leave the stage now. And I was like, thanks for being the bad guy, so we didn't have to, because this is like the absolute worst, man. It's like it's the blessing and a curse of playing clubs. You get to play what you want, but at the same time, you're at the mercy of whoever's had too many drinks.
Sure. Yeah. Oftentimes in the situation like that, I consider just smiling and saying, yeah, we'll do it, and then not playing it. And if they come back up again, I just tell them that we've already played it and that they missed it.
Yeah.
With that drunk, dude, like they like, oh, okay, there's a good possibility. But anyway, like there's a way to just say yes. You never say no, right? And some people abide by it. Don't say no to the client. Just say yes and then don't do it or something. I don't know what the follow-up is with that, but that's something that I consider. Just like, okay, sure, we'll do it. And then just continue with the set. Well, I thought you were going to play that song. Well, we did. Didn't you hear it?
Yeah, it must have been in the bathroom. No, my favorite thing to do on stage, I would do this all the time, especially if like bachelor parties or bachelorette parties or whatever, like parties come through and they're like wasted. I'll be like, hey, you guys know Uptown Funk? And they all just like are like, woo, they're like super excited to hear it. I'm like, all right, here we go. And then we just play like All the Things You Are or something. Right. Right. We didn't go so far as to play that boom, 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 bop. But I promise you, Paul Deemer, that the very first gig that we play outside of quarantine, that's going to be on there. We'll make sure to put that in there.
Yeah. Good. Cool. Well, I wanted to say as a closing note to this session, in the vein of what we were just talking about, always set your price for these. Don't play free gigs. Set your rate. And right now, we're at an opportune moment for that, because the majority of us aren't gigging. So we're all sitting here at this start line, right, waiting for this pandemic to pass.
Yeah.
And here are these clients and talent buyers waiting to hire us, and that the bar is going to go up for us to start, and we're all going to start at the same time. So when we're all doing that, that's when everyone has the same fucking price, the same standard, not for free, and something that is like respectable, right? Because I think the fear has been that if I scare away a potential client or whatever, I won't get hired again. Well, we're not working right now. You don't have to feel like you're going to lose a gig right now. It's not going to happen. So this is an opportune time to never play for free, especially dealing with all the shit that we just talked about and worse. We only touched the surface of it, but now is the time to do that, right? We're already probably going to be working towards incorporating, parts in a contract regarding our health and social distancing and stuff. Why not join at the hip? And also we would like a green room, some parking, and some fucking respectable pay for everybody. So if whoever's watching, ask for what you're worth. And if you don't, that's fine. Just don't complain about musicians that don't get paid and you can't make a living as a musician. You can't say both. You can't not ask for what you're worth and then complain that artists can't make a living. Just
and don't undercut each other too, man. Like if they say, well, like, we're already hiring this band for X amount of money, and you're like, oh, we'll do it X amount of money, which is like $100 less. Like, don't do that shit, man, because it's like you'll always have a gig, but like stealing a gig from another person and stealing it out from another person is like the worst thing. So absolutely, man, word. And we all got to stick together with that. It's like group mentality. And the only reason why there is a precedent set about how much people will accept is because certain people have accepted that in the past. And once you give in once, it becomes the standard. And the only standard, that should be, out there is that we're what we are doing is valid enough. Someone said, I can't remember who it was, but somebody was saying, like, I think the true test of how important like the arts are is when quarantine hit and nobody could do anything else. What were they doing with their time? They were listening to music, they were watching movies, TV shows, video games, looking at art, doing all this shit, They weren't focused on like all these like engineers and they're like, oh, well, let me look at some like really great floor plans. Like, no, man, like they were binge watching. So respect the arts, look out for one another. A great
Absolutely. That's it. Like ask for a livable wage. And right now this is like a restart. We have the privilege. There's a lot of shit and it's unfortunate, embarrassing in a lot of ways. It's a lot of misfortune regarding this whole situation, but to make a silver lining out of it, this is a restart, I think, for us to reset that standard. And if you take a gig, if you turn down 3 gigs that pay 25 to take a gig and increase the opportunity and your availability and the possibility of getting a gig that pays 150, you get that 1 gig that pays the same amount as those 3 gigs and more. And you get all that time to practice, which is another thing that is an issue in town, is that bands are more often than not unrehearsed and people can't shed. And it's just like throw and go for a lot of our music here in town. And that's because I think everyone's taking like every gig that they can for scraps, So it's a higher paying gig and allow yourself more practice time. Anyways, I'm off the
100%, man. And for those listening, people who are doing the Lord's work right now is Awesome Jazz Society. They're doing a lot of really great stuff. So go check out Project Safety Net. They're really looking out for us here in Austin and making sure that we're taken care of in crazy times. Man, Paul, do you have anything you want to plug? You got like website or any upcoming stuff you want to plug?
Well, tomorrow I actually have a similar kind of webinar with a good friend and amazing bassist and colleague of mine named Nick Clark.
Yeah.
And we'll be having a hang tomorrow at 7:30. And other than that, I would implore everyone to check out the Austin, Texas Musician organization on Facebook. And they also have a membership application process that you can pursue through their website, Austin, Texas Musicians. It might be a .org. Check out their Facebook page, and you'll be able to find out how to. Or you can private message me if you'd like, and I can direct you when I have the resources in front of me. But that's one thing I want to plug. And then finally, of course, I'm giving lessons and consultation for both individuals for music musical pursuits, and also bands. And I'm also working with production consultation as well. And that's through, I have my business that I just incorporated called Paul Deemer Everybody, or PDE. It's kind of a joke as far as the name. Shouldn't have said that. And also, I've got a partnership with a business partner, Chris Flores, that we do artist management and consulting and artist and A&R stuff, and that's called Loro Management. And so those are all things that I'm involved in right now, and that we're trying to get moving and healthy, and just really trying to contribute to the community in as many ways as we can. But those are all my plugs.
Badass, man. Well, Paul, you are undeniably one of the most killing dudes in town. You're always working, COVID aside, you are always working, always doing really great stuff. Everybody go check out his Facebook page and check out all of his stuff so you can hear him shedding both trombone and trumpet, becoming a whiz on both. And we'll keep doing this. Thanks so much for being the second official guest on Off the Bandstand, and we'll have you back on whenever you want to be here. It's great to have you. So thanks for coming on.
Christian, thank you so much. And of course, anytime, and we'll see you soon. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Peace out. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Bye.